So, you've decided to try martial arts, but since you've never done anything like that before, you want some ideas how. So let me help you out. That's why I'm here. My name is Joe, and welcome to Fighting Words. Typically, I do martial arts book reviews, but I also touch on other martial arts related subjects. Now, one thing I've noticed a lot of people asking over the years is, how do I get into martial arts? It's typically accompanied by the idea of like, what style should I do? That is, I would say, largely less important than the type of school that you find. So I'm going to focus on the latter, but we are going to touch on the former a bit. I'd say the most important thing to start with is figuring out what you want from martial arts. So people get into martial arts for a variety of reasons. A lot of them want to learn self-defense. If that is your focus, then you should look for a school where they are simulating the type of violence that you're trying to keep yourself from facing. So, for example, in a lot of traditional martial arts schools, there will be very formal, very stylized attack and defense exercises. Someone will, take up a very rigid stance from about 6 feet away from his partner, and then take a giant step forward and attack with a straight punch to the chest. And real violence doesn't look like that. So you would need to think about, okay, when I'm looking for a school, I need something where they regularly practice against, people swinging haymakers at the head, against clothing grabs, against bear hugs, and it's best if these things are contested. So, instead of somebody just throwing a big punch and then freezing in place while you do your, 8-move combination on him, it helps if part of the drill is he's wearing big puffy gloves, you got a mouth guard in, and you use your training while he's legitimately trying to pop you. So if there isn't any sort of training that looks like that, then the focus probably is not self-defense. So if you're looking for self-defense, look for something like that. A lot of other people get into martial arts because of fitness. So if fitness is what you want in martial arts, again, pick your martial arts school carefully. There are schools that I visited where, they won't really do any sort of warm-ups, and the drills they do are at a very relaxed pace, and you barely get your heartbeat up. So if fitness is your focus, a school like that might not be for you. But for instance, capoeira, there's a lot of body movement there. There's a lot of, cartwheels and squatting down to the ground, and a lot of very dynamic movement. So that would be one example of an environment where, it would be good for your physical fitness level because you're doing a lot of stuff. Another reason people get attracted to martial arts is because of something they saw in a movie. So take, for instance, the Ip Man movies. They make Wing Chun Kung Fu look cool. I've taken Wing Chun. I've enjoyed Wing Chun. I don't know anyone who could do it the way that they showed in the movies, because the movies are meant to really highlight how spectacular something can look in an optimalized or even sometimes fantastic situation. Going back to capoeira, I remember when I was in middle or high school seeing a movie called Only the Strong. And it was all about guys fighting each other with capoeira. And on an impressionable teenager, I was like, oh man, if I just learned how to backflip fight, I would be unbeatable. I like capoeira. it's not going to make you unbeatable. So bear in mind that if you do get attracted to a certain style because you see it in a movie or a TV show or even a demo, it might not match the experience that you have in class. There's an expression that you should, believe half of what you see and none of what you hear. And I think when it comes to seeing martial arts look really cool on TV and stuff, this saying really applies to that. So once you've started thinking about what you want from a martial arts school, I would actually suggest writing out a list and even enumerating them based on how much you value them. Like I said, there's so many reasons to get into martial arts. I've only touched on a few here. So figure out what you want and write it down, and figure out which one of those things you value most, and which one of those things is like the second most valuable, and so on. Because the next thing you're going to start doing is looking for a school. This is one of the reasons why, people online will ask advice about, what's the best martial art for this, or what's this martial art like. I don't generally recommend a specific martial art most of the time because I don't know if they're going to be able to find that school in their area. So when you start looking for martial arts schools, you might not, again, going back to the Ip Man example, you're enamored with Wing Chun. You really want to do Wing Chun because it looks so cool in that movie. Well, if they don't have a Wing Chun school around, are you still going to take a martial art? Because you're not going to be able to take your number one choice, right? So, when you start looking at the martial arts schools that are in your area, then the way that I tend to approach it is, what are the operating hours and what classes are available? That's the first thing I go for. Because the second thing I'm going to go for is, how does that fit into my schedule? If you have a late work shift and the class that you want to take is at 5 p.m., it might not be the best option for you to try. Because you don't want to get sweaty and then have to rush to work after that. Maybe. Ultimately it's up to you. But yeah, figure out the logistical side of it first. And then the very next step is to actually visit the school. Proper etiquette is to call the school first. Just to give them a heads up, see what their hours are, and most importantly, ask them if you can come in and observe a class, if you can participate in a trial. Those are going to be the big ones. I've seen some places do a free class, some will do a free week. Rarely you might get, a discounted month if you really want to. But when taking those things into consideration, let them know that you're going to show up. It's just, part of that is just common courtesy. The second thing is to sort of, if they were going to do one particular exercise that night that might not be for beginners, maybe they'll change their focus a bit and be more accommodating to you. It's also not uncommon, if you're first joining a school, you might get some intro classes that are one-on-one with the instructor or a head student. Now, when you come up with the list of things you want from, your martial arts experience, I've named off a couple of things, but just think about, are you so attached to a certain style that that's your number one thing? I want to do Shotokan karate. I want to do Krav Maga, whatever it is. You know, think about how much you really want to do that class. Put that on your list. Think about the kind of environment do you want to get into. There are, in many martial arts places, opportunities for competition, you know, whereas other schools will not be big into that. So if you want to get into some competitive aspect of it, think about, again, how much you would value that and how seriously. It's not uncommon for, I'd say, most students, most places to maybe do a couple of competitions just sort of casually. There are other people who really want to focus on the competitive aspect, and there are going to be some schools that are going to be better for that than others. It could be learning a particular skill like acrobatics or weapons. There are, again, some schools that are going to be better at that than others. So bear that in mind. I'd really like to learn how to use the nunchaku. All right, well, you're probably not going to get that from a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. So, again, take that into consideration. I've touched on the fitness thing. If that is one of your motivating factors, make sure that you can get a good workout from the training that you're in. And it varies widely. Another aspect might be, to think about what sort of tradition or culture you would like to have in the school. Some people are okay with, a very boot camp, like military style setting. And you tend to find that in Japanese and Korean martial arts. Some people are, more comfortable in a more laid back environment. Martial arts from Brazil are going to have, typically a more laid back environment than as opposed to a more militaristic setting. So figure out, even before you get in there, like what sort of vibe do I want to deal with? Because at the end of the day, ultimately, you're probably going to be spending more than a few years at this one place. If that's your goal, I want to train this thing, let me get in there. If it's not enjoyable, if it's not what you want, it's going to be very hard to get yourself to class. It's going to be a waste of your money and time. So think about all that stuff when you formulate your list. Once you've started finding the schools that best fit your schedule and that offer the things that you're looking for, I would definitely strongly suggest try multiple schools. Don't just pick the first one you try because they smiled a lot and I like that. Sometimes it really clicks, but I would strongly suggest that you check out multiple different locations and see what works best, not just for your schedule, but I'd say more importantly, the environment. Again, you're going to be training at these places probably for many, many years if you really enjoy it. So it's best to find one of those places that just syncs up with you the right way. And finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about red flags. Signs that maybe this isn't the best school to go to. I'm going to give just a pure layman's perspective on it. In researching this, I've seen multiple lists, and some of them talk about things that, unless you actually have sufficient knowledge in martial arts, aren't going to mean anything to you. So if you have zero knowledge of martial arts except maybe what you see on TV, how do I determine if this might be something to watch out for? Maybe it's not such a great school. I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is promises of rank. Now, to get it out of the way, not all martial arts will have a ranking system, but a lot do. So it's important to understand that while some places have standards that might include how long you're training, the length of time, how many classes you attend. It would be extremely suspicious for someone to promise you that, you know, I can make you a black belt in exactly 18 months or something like that. And I'd say in particular, a black belt rank in most respected styles is generally a minimum of 3 years. And in some places, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is notoriously difficult, or it's a long road to get your black belt. It usually takes, closer to 10 years in that one. So 3 to 10 years is sort of your scale. So if anyone's promising you, guaranteeing you a black belt in a year, I mean, to be honest, if the only thing that's important to you is to be able to say that you're a black belt, that somebody gave you a black piece of cloth that you can tie around your waist, maybe that's the place for you. But if you want the skills that belt typically represents, it's going to take dedication. So anyone that promises you, we can guarantee you're going to have this belt in this amount of time, that's a red flag. Another one is loyalty oaths. And I'm sort of hedging my bets on this one. In Japanese and Korean martial arts, it's mostly common there, maybe in a few other places. Sometimes you do recite dojo-kun, which is, basically reciting like, okay, we will respect each other, we will be honest with each other, all that stuff. And some Korean martial arts I've noticed will say, you need to be loyal to your country and to your parents and this and that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, if there is basically a ritual recital at the beginning or the end of class about how great the school is and how great the teacher is, that is leaning toward like cult building behavior. So, I think it would give most people the willies. Don't get involved in cults. If they have a lot of loyalty oaths, it's probably not the place for you. Another thing is if they expressly forbid training at other places, you typically won't get this on your first day. But there are some places that sort of pass themselves off as like, okay, this is tradition. You need to be loyal to the teacher. Any place that won't let you look elsewhere for knowledge is not a good learning environment, and we're getting back into sort of the cult-like environment. There are a few little exceptions. If you train at a very competitive gym and you and one other gyms are the only game in town, your instructor may be a little upset if you go train at another place and there's an exchange of competition techniques there. This isn't particularly common, and even in an environment as competitive as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's actually not uncommon, for somebody to drop in on somebody else's class every once in a while. But that's the only legit reason I can see for, okay, don't train there. They are our rivals. Please don't train there. But even then, I would still say to sort of keep an eye on that sort of situation so it doesn't get out of hand. Another thing to look out for is extraneous expenses. So, if they try to upsell you on gear, great, you want to buy one of our duffel bags? It'll cost you more than the price of a regular duffel bag, but it has our logo on it. And, same thing with sparring gear, patches. There is a little bit of wiggle room there because some large organizations are very stringent about, okay, you're going to represent us, so your uniform needs to have our patch or our logo or whatever somewhere on it. And I think that's a bit understandable, but if you are being upcharged to put that on, I'd say maybe step away from that. Another example of extraneous expenses, sometimes there's a black belt club. So if you pay an extra $50 a month or whatever, you get to come to this exclusive black belt class. And yeah, I can see paying for the privilege of getting extra training. It's not like I don't understand that. But if it's sort of held over your head, like, if you don't go to this class, you're probably not going to get your black belt, that is unethical. Don't do that. Leave. Another red flag would be if the environment is not clean. Here's the thing. In a lot of martial arts schools, there's going to be close personal contact. Obviously there's, grappling schools where you're literally going to be, chest to chest or back to chest. You're going to be like on top of each other. And even in schools that don't have a grappling focus, you're still going to be spending time, usually engaging other students. Your forearms are going to be touching with your blocking maneuvers or, your trapping. You might do throws and stuff like that. If the environment is not clean, it can be a breeding ground for things like ringworm, which is gross. Ringworm is a fungus. I don't know if scientifically it's the same thing, but my understanding is that it's very close to athlete's foot. You don't want it. It's communicable. So, if there's that, if there's a low quality of hygiene with the students. In a lot of martial arts classes, you need to be diligent about having your fingernails cut. People shouldn't have jewelry hanging off of them. Like having a ring or, a very thin chain tucked in somewhere. That's okay in a lot of cases, depending on, again, how much contact you're having. But there's no excuse for someone to have giant hoop earrings. If there's any kind of contact at all, that's basically asking for trouble. And just sort of look out for things like that. Most gyms, if they have a mat, will probably be cleaning that mat either immediately before or immediately after each training session. And any place with a floor needs to be swept regularly, so that nobody's bringing in like dirt and gravel that people are going to step on. Something unusual to watch out for is if the uniforms have pockets, because limbs, extremities can get caught in pockets, or people can have stuff in their pockets that they shouldn't have. I've actually seen a video where, this guy, these people, I don't remember exactly what was going on, but they were wearing gi-style uniforms, but they had pockets, and somebody's keys fell out of their pockets, and somebody else stepped on the key and put about half an inch of it into their foot. Pockets are bad. If pockets are a regular part of their uniform, maybe avoid that. So this is more like health and safety stuff. Another red flag would be, let's call it an unprofessional instructor. If you go to class and the instructor's, on their phone half the time, if they show up late, if they show up hungover, I've never experienced that, but I've heard people who have. If you are paying someone for instruction, they need to do their best to give you their full attention in that moment. If they are unable to do it, usually they'll have another higher ranked person take over for them. Life happens, I get it, but if you show up for your free trial and, you know, it doesn't seem like the instructor is paying attention to what's going on in class, that's not just disrespectful to you and a waste of your time and money, but it can also be dangerous. Because if an instructor isn't paying attention to what his students are doing, they could be doing things that could get them hurt. Another thing to look out for is if an instructor has multiple high belt ranks. And I'd say particularly if they are a younger guy, if they're, 5 years on either side of the age of 30 and they have like multiple fifth degree or higher black belts. That would be extremely rare. I've known people who have certifications, have like a wall's worth of certifications, but they also train all the time, and we know who they've been training with, and you can track it down. But, multiple high belt ranks on a younger person should raise some eyebrows. It's not impossible to have those things, and someone sporting multiple belt ranks in multiple martial arts is actually not that uncommon. But usually in most systems, to get like beyond third degree black belt, you need to really focus in on that particular system. So again, a large number of high black belt ranks on a particularly young individual. That would be a red flag. Another thing would be sort of abusive or bullying seniors. Now, this sort of goes back into, check out the vibe of the academy. Martial arts can attract a lot of different people. Weirdly, the ones that actually don't have a whole lot of hard contact sparring seem to get these type of guys where I'm a black belt or a brown belt, and now I have the privilege of, beating up the younger belts. I've seen it happen. Luckily, I've never been in an environment where that's really been a thing. But, you might not see it on your first day at the school. If you're doing your little trial, you might not catch it. But keep an eye out if it seems like someone is haughty because of the belt that they have. If they're pushing around like, the younger guys, the lower ranked guys, if they're making them do push-ups for no reason or whatever. Usually this needs to be a pattern, and you're probably not going to see it initially. But, keep an eye out for that sort of behavior. That's a tremendous red flag. That's a terrible environment, and I wouldn't advise staying in it. And the last one I'm going to talk about here is if they don't allow any outside visitors, any outside observers, basically if you're not able to get a free trial or an observation. That is terrible. That's a big red flag, because what are they doing that they don't want anyone to see? The fact is, it could be anything, but my guess is it would be something akin to cult-like behavior, which unfortunately shows up in martial arts a lot more than a lot of other environments. So yeah, make sure that you can get your free trial, you can get your observation, because if they don't let you in the door, you probably don't want to be part of it. So, that's all I have. I hope this was helpful. If it was, I'd appreciate a like. Please share with your friends. And let me know if you can think of any particular red flags or anything you wish you knew before you got in to training at a particular martial arts school. Any mistakes you've made or any things you missed out on. So that's all I have for this week. Thank you very much. Have a good week.